Hello everyone and welcome to the latest in the interview series here on Back of the Net. Thanks for your recent feedback about the channel. All the comments greatly appreciated. One person that does get a lot of high praise, it's not me, it's not Sam, it is Neil Dawson. Neil, how you doing?
I'm very good. That's just my mum. She writes in every now and again.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Another person who comes in for a lot of comment is Tom Jordan. Tom, how are you, mate?
Very well, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, that's normally just me, just commenting on myself. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, it's a pleasure to have you both on. And to everyone who's watching, be sure to use the live chat. We'll pop your comments on screen throughout the show to make sure you're part of the conversation. Right, let's get started. Today, we have one of the major pillars in the club's greatest ever era. A dynamic right-back, his constant running and lethal crossing was a dominant feature in the club's climb to the very, very top. Latterly, he converted into a very calm footballing centre-back, and he was instrumental in the club stabilising in the top flight through keeping many a legendary striker quiet. Hugely respected by teammates and fans alike, he was a natural choice for club captain, a role he carried with huge dignity. And he now passes on his wealth of knowledge in a scouting role for the club. And also, he's got a new role as a media pundit. It is the one, the only, Franno. Simon Francis, how are you?
Hi, guys. Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Good to be on here. Hell of an introduction, that.
Well, it was a bit long, wasn't it? I realised that as I was going. But, you know, where do you start with someone like you? And also, I've got to add, happy birthday, because I saw that this week. You got congratulations from the club, didn't you?
Well, I was trying to keep it quiet, but I think social media get hold of it earlier than anyone else. So, yeah, it's not the ones I'm counting now after 35, but I might celebrate 40, but anything in between, keeping it quiet.
Yeah, me and Neil are the same, aren't we?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Excellent. Well, look, we are, I've got to say also, we're a little bit disappointed that the Sky Sports waistcoat doesn't make an appearance for this interview, so we're obviously a bit further down.
You should have given me a heads up. It's a bit warm in here. It's colder up in London in the studio.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, and we'll kick off with going right back to the beginning. Really, you grew up in Nottingham. No top-class pro, as far as I'm aware, has ever grown up wanting to play right back. What position did you start off with, and who converted you?
Good question. Good place to start. You know what? I ended up playing a lot of positions when I was younger. All through the youth team when I was at Notts County, because of my size. I grew to a good size fairly early before a lot of other lads at my age. So I was throwing about centre half, centre mid. To be fair, never as a fullback in the early days. Like I said, because of my size, it was more of a central role. And then as I got older, I got an injury at Notts County, which meant I got released. Had Osgood Schlatters in both of my knees, which I don't know if anyone's had it, any of you guys from playing a lot of sport when I was younger. It ruined me really for a whole year. I mean, the diagnosis was to stop playing. And at 16 years old, it was the most important time of my youth career to try and get a contract at Notts County. Ultimately, I couldn't play as many games or train as much as I wanted to. So they released me, rightly so as well. I was nowhere near the level I should have been at that age. Went on trial at Nottingham Forest. Within a few weeks of that, played centre mid again, just got thrown in there because of my height. They said that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't fit enough, couldn't get around the pitch. And again, I had no arguments really. I had no expectations of that. So even then, I never really had aspirations of what position I would be. I just took it really back to basics. And I ended up going to college, living at home, studying a BTEC in sports science, playing for the local district team, centre half then at the time, centre midfield as well. Again, never as a fullback, which was funny. And then our college coach, who actually at the time was coaching myself and Wes Morgan. Wes Morgan had been released from Notts County. Fortunately, he got a trial at Forest and did get in a couple of months later. Obviously, from there, went on to have huge success, especially with Leicester. And then, yeah, the college coach got a job up at Bradford, which was just a real stroke of luck. I had absolutely nothing else going for me unless someone had spotted me playing district football. He took two of us up from the college up for a trial at Bradford. And again, I didn't have any aspirations. I was just excited to go and train with a football league club. They were in the Championship at the time. They'd been relegated from the Premier League the season before that. And they were on the verge of going into administration. They had some big players there, Danny Cadamartri, Ashley Ward, lots of household names at the time who were earning a lot of money. And they were trying to get shipped out off the wage bill. They were bringing young lads through because they had to. And in such a short space of time, I'd gone from playing youth team football for Bradford, which I was absolutely buzzing about, really excited to just be in that environment, coming in every day as a youth team player, to then in the first team at 17 within 4 or 5 months of signing for the club. So it was a real whirlwind debut for me, and something I had to get my head around quickly. And I didn't necessarily do that. I struggled with it a little bit. I was a bit of a rabbit caught in the headlights, as I say, which is understandable. I was very young. I made my debut at Forest, actually, coincidentally. When I was 17 at the City Ground, had all my family there. So that was a big occasion. But I never really believed in myself because I'd come from getting released once, saying Forest telling me that I wasn't good enough as well. And it took me a number of years really to get that self-belief. Went from Bradford to Sheffield United under Neil Warnock because I'd played a handful of games for Bradford and they needed money. They needed to get not just me off the wage bill, but I think £300,000 at the time. Sheffield United paid for me. I went there, ended up having not a great time there, a couple of injuries, moved back home to Nottingham, which was probably the worst decision for me. I wish I'd been advised better at the time or even known any different, but I didn't. I was 18, 19 years old. I had a little bit of money in my pocket. I had the opportunity to buy my first apartment, and I chose to live in Nottingham near all my friends, my family. And I was going out every single weekend as a young lad does, and still doing the things I probably would have done if I was at college, when really I was a professional footballer and I shouldn't have done that. Definitely a message I carry with me now. I try and pass that on to young lads now because they're still doing the same, and you just end up playing catch up, which I did certainly until I got to Bournemouth. I was chasing the career that I should have had for a long, long time, and the penny didn't really drop until Eddie Howe came back to Bournemouth. That is the honest truth for me. There was times, there was games, there was periods I signed for Charlton after being at Southend for a while, and that was when I thought, this is the biggest moment for me. Big football club, Charlton Athletic. I've got to make it happen now, otherwise I'm going to be in League One, League Two for the rest of my career. And then unfortunately, something that wasn't down to me, because I'd been playing well, Phil Parkinson got the sack. Chris Powell came in, didn't fancy me for whatever reason, wanted his own players. And again, a stroke of luck. I had a few of them in my career. Lee Bradbury brought me back to Bournemouth, and the rest, as they say, is history.
You mentioned Neil Warnock there. He's always an interesting character to talk about because obviously he's got that well-known anagram in his name that's well known in the game. How did past players that played for him either talk about him reverentially or struggle with him? How were you with him?
I was great with him. He was brilliant for my career at the time. Again, as I said, I just didn't take enough on board that I should have. Right up until I worked under Eddie Howe, I'd had quite old school managers in the approach that the style they managed. They were very much in the change room, shouting as loud as they can, trying to get the best out of you. Tactically, not a lot to work with. Didn't work on too much before games. It was just man management, the motivational skills that they had. And Neil Warnock certainly had that. He could put an arm around you and make you feel, 10 feet tall and say you'd be the best player out there today. And ultimately, that's what he's done for so many years. Even at the top level as well, it's so surprising. I remember speaking to Harry when he went to Cardiff on loan. I said, how does he do it in the Premier League? You're still coming up against some of the top teams. And he said, look, tactically, don't get me wrong, he's on a different level to Eddie Howe, but his man management skills, the way he can get the best out of players is incredible, really. So credit to him for that. But I really didn't pay him back in full at my time at Sheffield United. And that's certainly one of the regrets I had.
You mentioned about when we got you from Charlton, and the Charlton fans seemed to get on your back a little bit. Could you sense that, and did that affect you going forward? Because you never know how much the player kind of knows what the thoughts are of the fans, but they seemed to get on your back a little bit before you came to us. Did that affect you at all?
Oh, hugely, Tom. Incredible, really. And I spoke about this, I think, on a Sky show I did the other day about social media and how much of an effect it can have on players. For positive reasons, yes, I get that completely. I'm just not a fan of it because of the negativity and the way I think a lot of even footballers nowadays, they live their lives based on what they see on social media and how they are portrayed. And it's a real shame. And I remember coming off Twitter so this was probably 10 years ago now. So Twitter can't have been obviously as big as it was now. And I got a lot of abuse from Charlton fans on Twitter. I just had my daughter at the time. So I was balancing that with training, and it's definitely not an excuse, but I wasn't maximising my potential at Charlton. It's easy to say that. I'd fallen out of favour with Chris Powell. Like I said, I was playing in reserve games, and then it just got to the point where I wasn't enjoying it at all. And I was getting abuse. I was getting called the worst right back ever to play for the football club at Charlton, the worst player we've ever seen. And how can that not affect you? I'd never had that kind of abuse before. I'd never really been at a big football club like Charlton and been on social media at the time. So I hadn't seen both sides of it. Sheffield United was a big club, but social media was only just taking off then. And it affected me hugely. My confidence was shot to pieces. And again, at Bournemouth, I hadn't heard too much about the football club. I just knew that Lee Bradbury was there, and we played together at Southend. He handed me a lifeline. You know, the next day after he called me, I was driving down with my now wife and my daughter, who was just about to turn 1 at the time, and that was it really. It was the next step. It was the only step for me. Came off social media and thought, let's just give it a crack. Let's see where this goes.
I was just about to say, Jeff, going a lot further down the line, which obviously we'll get to later, but that must have made it a little bit sweeter when we won the league at Charlton. Must have.
Oh yeah.
I have to say, it's nothing can take away playing in the Premier League, captain in the Premier League, playing against some of the best players in world football that day, and getting promoted away at Charlton the way it happened. And yeah, look, I don't hold any grudges against clubs or players or anything like that, but for it to be as sweet as it was on that day, yeah, it could not have gone any better. That told me, the fans that told me I'd never amount to anything, or the worst player ever to play for the football club, to go back there and the way it did, obviously with the last 10 minutes and then the results going in our favour as they did, it just, honestly, it was one of the best days. I'm sure you guys agree, obviously.
Yeah,
as fans, as a player, it was phenomenal.
And Fariata as well, because he was released by them, wasn't he? So he probably enjoyed scoring.
Yeah, and we had the chat afterwards. Even beforehand, we always enjoyed playing against Charlton. I think the first game in the Championship we played against them, that was my first game as captain, so that gave me an extra buzz, an extra spring in my step that day, and I think we won 1-0. And that was almost a chance to prove them wrong and prove myself right. Once I was at Bournemouth, once Eddie came back, I started to believe in myself and believe the potential that I had and the player I could be, and that was certainly one of the important steps of it.
So when you came down to Bournemouth, you obviously came into Lee Bradbury's team, and that was no bones about it. It's a difficult time for Lee Bradbury, wasn't it, when that first season you were with the club? Do you want to tell us what it was like?
It was interesting, to say the least. I mean, I think the second day I was there, Fletch stepped down as assistant to Bradders to continue being a player. I think he was doing both at the time. He couldn't juggle both. You know what Fletch is like. He was an important part of the dressing room. So that was a strange couple of days. And then everything happening with Eddie Mitchell in the background and the rumours of Max coming into the football club. So at that time, I was fairly focused on just football. I wasn't entertained with anything else. Wasn't looking too far into the future. I was only on loan at the time. I just wanted to impress yourselves, the football club, and say thanks to Bradders, really, in a way, for, look, he's given me a lifeline. I think it was because Nathan Byrne got injured, actually. So, a stroke of luck, really, that I came down and just instantly I settled with the lads, good bunch of lads, similar ages at the time, Charlie, Cookie as well, coming into the football club, and started signing a few good players. And I think I've always said that Eddie will be the first to admit that he inherited a very good squad for League One at the time. Bradders signed a few of them, obviously Paul Groves as well coming in, who instilled a good footballing philosophy. I have to say, training was very good under him. Tactically, he knew the game inside out. We'd work on a lot of patterns in training, and like I said, Eddie coming in was just that icing on the cake at the right time for us. But no doubt, I had to say thanks to Bradders at the time, and it was a really exciting move for me.
Well, Paul Groves is really interesting because we've spoken about him a few times with different people on this show. So he had, because you're right, he inherited good players. He brought in good players. We spent very big money at the time on players like Matt Tubbs and stuff. And no one's really got a bad word to say about him from a playing point of view. And you just said the same. Why do you think it didn't work?
It's a good question. I think towards the end, when Eddie became available, it was almost a no-brainer. If Eddie was there and had the chance to come back, that would have played a huge part in it. But like I said, I think Paul was more of a coach on the grass day to day. He was great. I enjoyed training. I got a lot out of it. I was learning stuff from Paul Groves and Sean Brooks at the time. But sometimes you see top coaches try and become a manager, and it's so different being a manager in that dressing room, trying to get the best out of players rather than almost being yourself on the training ground and just trying to coach players and make them better day in, day out. There's such a huge difference. And I think that's where he struggled a little bit, trying to get the best out of a few players who not necessarily were in the right frame of mind, and then a few up and coming players like myself and a few others who just wanted to impress. But I never had a bad word to say about him. I really enjoyed my time under him. And same with Lee Bradbury. But I think with Max coming into the club and a little bit of money, you know, getting invested into the football club, and then Eddie being available at the time to come back, I just think that all accumulated into one, and really it was the right time for Eddie to step in.
Before Eddie come in, Franno, we obviously, like we said then, we had a really good group of players. You could see that, and for whatever reason, it wasn't quite happening. Did you or any of the other kind of big signings, did you ever feel like maybe I should have gone somewhere else because I don't know what's happening here? We've got all these players, but it's just not working. Do you feel like you ever felt maybe I should have gone down a different route?
Not me, no, because I had all the chances before that. 24, 25, I think I was when I signed. And this was almost my last chance. I was going to give it a go as much as I could. I didn't have any, again, ambitions to then move on to another club. I wasn't trying to put myself in the shop window. My way of looking at it was, look, I'm not good enough for Charlton in League One. This is another lifeline for me rather than having to drop down to potentially League Two, which I didn't want to do. So I just wanted to take it game by game at Bournemouth, and that's all I did really. And again, until Eddie came back, and it was literally overnight, I have to say, the first day or two when we had a chat and he took us down to the beach, and then training from then, there was almost that switch in the mindset between all the lads, and I'm sure they'll say it. That was when we started to believe, right, we could get promoted this season. You know, we went on a great run even when he first came in, didn't we? And the wins started coming, and that's when the belief starts. When you start winning games, game after game, you feel unstoppable, and that's certainly what happened at that time. And I don't think anyone was thinking about leaving the football club. No way. As soon as Eddie came back, because within the first few months, you would have said he's hands down the best coach I've ever worked with.
So what did Eddie do to inspire you to score in that first game? A free kick against Tranmere Rovers. And why didn't you take free kicks and let Charlie Daniels take them since that time?
That's a good question. I think Eddie took me off them after that. He was wondering why a right-footed fullback was on everything.
There you go.
I'll tell you what he did. He took us down to the beach. And you've probably heard this story. I'm not sure if you have, but it was the first day he came in and we didn't train till the afternoon. So he took us all down. And individually, we were down for about an hour and a half. And we make it quite regular every season or once a month, twice a month, we'd go down after a game on a Monday morning. We'd get a coffee at West Beach, take a walk down, all of us. And the manager would individually, and he did this on the first day, pull everybody for 5 minutes. And he'd talk to us about how much he'd watched us over the past month, talk about our strengths, talk about things we need to improve on and how he's going to be there for us and what he's going to do with us. And attention to detail. He was telling me things about myself that I didn't even know about the last few games that he watched. It was incredible, really. And he said he was surprised that I was taking corners and free kicks for a fullback, even though he had Kieran Trippier at Burnley. So I thought he was pulling my leg a little bit at the time, who was brilliant on set pieces. And just from then, like I said, I mean, I don't know why I was on the free kick. Maybe we were struggling to score goals. So I just took a lash at it, and it was one of the last goals I've ever scored. But yeah, I mean, from then we just had a huge belief within the group, and we were getting closer anyway. I mean, sometimes when managers leave the football clubs, it's almost down to the players then to police themselves. They become their own mini management team, and we were getting on really well. There's a good team spirit there. We had a good set of lads, even in the League One days, certainly, and that's what put us in a good position under Eddie. We knew everyone was on the same page, no doubt about it, and that's why we had the success so quickly.
At least you can remember your goals. So that's what I was thinking. If you don't get many, at least you can remember them all.
Well, that's why, because I don't get many. That's exactly why.
Ted McDougall couldn't remember any of his goals.
When Matt Ritchie arrived, and I mean that team was one of great partnerships, but there was no better partnership than yours and Matt's. Was that something that you actively worked on in training, or was it just one of those chemistry things where you just gelled and got each other instantly?
Both, a bit of both, I would say. More probably the training, again, from Eddie, the patterns of play we'd work on. He'd almost have a scenario to put into the players' heads in every single game. If you're in this situation on the pitch, Matty, you've got to be here. Franno, when you receive the ball, Matty's going to be in front of you on the right side, so you can pop up 1-2, run inside, underlap, and you're off. If Matty gets the ball at the right time, you're underlapping. When I went into every single game, I knew my runs I was going to make. I knew where Matty was, and it just became telepathic. And I'm sure Charlie and Pew would say the same on the other side. even partnerships in the middle of the pitch, you get to know each other's game inside out. There's no better feeling than having a consistent team week in, week out and knowing each other's strengths. And myself and Matty's was just, it was great. We built a great relationship on and off the pitch. He's not the most social. I think Matty will agree with that. He never wanted to come for coffee. He was the first to go home, and he didn't like a night out, never drank. And God knows how we got on, because he was always against any of the lads ever going out for a beer. And every time we had a win, and no disrespect to the league, but in League One, we could go out and have a beer on a Saturday night in Bournemouth and enjoy the win, and then get back in on a Monday morning, and we'd be fine with it. But Matty was always first in on Monday, like, who went out, who's had a drink, and he'd be fuming with the lads, and we were like, Matty, relax, it's fine, we'll be okay. But he was just a great lad, and I loved playing with him. Probably the number one I put on, I think I did a best 11 I played with when I finished, and he's probably the first name on the team sheet you put in. You go into battle, you want that Ritchie in your team, without a doubt. And I loved every single minute of playing with him. We had a great partnership, and yeah, for all those years, it was excellent. I loved every minute of it.
Fullback's dream, isn't it? When you've got someone that works so hard and covers behind you, it's superb.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, the ability he had on the ball was not underestimated, not underrated at all. But I think because he played out wide, people would expect him to have a trick or have speed. But in his head, he was just miles ahead of anyone for that level, League One and the Championship. So as soon as he got it, we'd always work on switches of play. So it'd be Sirs or Harry Arter, who would switch it to Matty. And as it's travelling in the air, I'd be on my bike, because I knew on either first touch, or if he had a touch, he'd play me in on the underlap, and the fullbacks would not know what to do, whether to go tight with Matty or track my run, which meant Matty would have space. And it just became so hard for teams to mark us. And we'd go into every game being so confident that one of us would either get an assist in the game or really be involved, and we'd have a lot of joy down that right side.
Talking about kind of relationships and stuff, and obviously you were known for putting some good balls in the box. How much easier did Jan Kermorgant make it? How much did your crosses look better because of how good Kermorgant was? Because that was another relationship, wasn't it? When you were getting down there, you must have felt like you could just get balls in the box, and Jan would get on the end of them. And going on from that, was he that a lot of Bournemouth fans, I think, feel like he was that missing piece of the jigsaw when he come in? Do you agree with that?
Exactly that, Tom. Yeah. No, we weren't necessarily total football when Eddie first came in, but we had the players to be, so we could play through the thirds, play into feet all the time. We had the option to obviously spin balls down the side, especially for Callum and Grabs when he was there in the early days, because you need pace. If teams are going to play a high line or they've got slow defenders, you need to exploit that and then be able to play in front of that, and that would gain us a lot of space in games, because early on we'd look to turn them, and teams would be like, well, hold on, we thought they were a total football team, but they're putting it in behind them. And we always had an answer for everything. And then Jan Kermorgant came into the team, and you just couldn't have found a better person. I mean, we had Brett playing in the 10, who was excellent, who could turn and find passes and score a hatful of goals like we saw. But Jan just brought that extra element, especially aerially, where if you did need that ball to go in the air, if you were under pressure, we had absolutely no doubt that putting that in there, or even just playing a ball up top, Jan nine times out of 10 would get hold of it, he'd chest it, or aerially he'd bring it down, or even with his foot at time. He was so agile, like Ibrahimovic, the way he brought the ball down and the way he could link play. And it was just brilliant, that relationship he'd either have with Callum or Brett would have with Callum, almost that, not big man, little man, because they were both big in size, but that front two that worked so well together. And he was brilliant. And again, like you say, when I got a bit of space in wide areas, I knew that if I could put a half decent ball into a good area, Jan would be on the end of it.
Everyone remembers the scissor kick that Jan scored against, I think it was Ipswich, wasn't it?
Yeah, Ipswich, yeah.
Do you have a favourite assist?
Wow, I don't think I've been asked that before. Maybe because no one would say, what's your favourite goal? Because there's not been enough. But
that was the sort of hidden question there, Franno.
Yeah, you know what? That's up there. The Ipswich one, definitely. I used to love just whipping balls in. I worked on it a lot. I remember when I was at Charlton, I was not great at crossing the ball. I always hit the first man, and I always thought, being a fullback, the way the game's going, you have to get forward more. You have to work on your crossing. And again, me and Matty, we would stay out after training. We'd work on those little combinations out wide and just whipping ball after ball into good areas. And Jan was excellent for that. The bicycle kick certainly up there. But I would probably say one of the Leeds ones was a good night when I managed to get 3. The first one was a little bit of luck, really, from the edge of the area, from Harty's corner. But after that, it was just one of them, I think, was a back heel, which was nice. So to have 3 assists in one game was certainly a big achievement for me, because that's what I prize myself on in a lot of games. Obviously, defending was was very important as a fullback. But we knew in attacking sense we'd always cause problems, and if I could try and get an assist or get in good areas to try and get assists, then I'd be happy with that. So I'd say any of the Leeds ones on the night, but probably the Ipswich one for a standout one, just with the finish that capitalised it. That was great.
Out of the players you've played with, who do you think had the most natural ability, and who do you think was the one that had to work the hardest to make the most of maybe slightly less ability?
Really good question again, Neil. I think natural ability of late, the past couple of years, David Brooks, hands down. Never seen a player like it on the ball, be able to glide past players. I remember when we first signed him, we went to La Manga, and he was a lot slimmer than he is now. Sorry, I think he was only getting over glandular fever his time at Sheffield United. So he often struggled to finish training sessions, and he never used to finish his meals. And we always used to think, who's this skinny kid we've signed? He can't. No, he can't. He's not strong enough. And then one of the first training sessions in La Manga, he nutmegged someone on the halfway line. We finished with the game. He dribbled past 3 players and then put it in the top corner. And when it's a left footer who does that, it just instantly looks better than someone who's right footed.
Yeah.
And I think it was Gozzo at the time. He was on my team. We just looked at each other and was like, well, that's why we've signed him. I mean, Eddie knew a young player when he saw one, and regardless of his size, and he's filled out a little bit now. He's got taller. He can compete a lot better physically, but natural ability, I'd say David Brooks. Harry Arter as well for being 2-footed for about 6 months. I never knew which foot he was stronger with when I first signed at the football club. That was, you can't say that about many players. All the ability in the world with the football at his feet. So yeah, David Brooks probably just pips Harry Arter on that one. And then the one that worked on their game the most was probably Callum Wilson. I'd say when he first came to the football club, technically, even now, you wouldn't say he's out and out a great technical striker or even finisher. And I think he'll admit that. I mean, I still speak to him a lot, and he does things in football matches that surprise me. I'd text him after the Everton game when he scored with his head, and I was like, you've been working on heading, because I never knew you were that good. The way he was in that football match. Yeah. And he just laughs about it and says, yeah, I'm on the training ground and working on my game. And you can't knock players like that. Again, why Eddie loved him, because he just ran his socks off. First thing we wanted him to do was run channels, use his strength, his upper body strength was incredible. And we almost didn't care what he was like with his feet, because we knew we'd get him in good areas. We knew he'd terrorise defenders. And then he'd work on his game every single day in training. And then the setbacks he had, the knee injuries, were so bad for him. And again, people would have questions outside the football club, will he ever come back from that? And the mindset he had, the mentality he had to do that, not once but twice. Credit to him. Worked on his game more than anybody else I've ever played with.
That second header he got against Newcastle, I was watching it thinking, I think Andy Carroll's got hold of him in training, because it was like an old-fashioned bullet header, wasn't it?
Exactly. And he wouldn't have done that the first couple of years for us. He wasn't known for his heading, definitely not. And even his finishing at times, he'd go through a training week, and it was a game on a Saturday that we needed to win, and he'd be missing the target, he'd be putting them over and putting them left and right of the goal, and we'd be thinking, if he does that on Saturday, we're not going to win. And then Saturday would come, and he'd score 2 or 3 for us. I remember when he was out for his knee injury, and the second time he said, the first thing I'm going to do, I'll score a hat-trick the first game back. And I was like, yeah, buzzing. Secretly in my head, I was like, he's not going to do that the first game back after a knee injury. Lo and behold, West Brom, he comes back and scores a hat-trick. Just had this incredible self-belief that I'd never seen him amongst a footballer. And yeah, I mean, huge praise to Callum for having that mindset all throughout his career.
Spoke a lot about a lot of these players that Eddie probably took to that next level. Someone that it didn't quite work out for, and a lot of fans agree, and we don't really know why, was Tequila Ranti. And a lot of players we've spoken to said how good and sharp he was in training. Do you know why it never really worked for TK? Because he always looked like he had something. It just never really come to fruition on a match day. Did he show a lot more behind the scenes in training and things like that, Franno?
To be fair, he showed what he did in matches for you guys. Glimpses of the ability he had, the pace he had, the first touch at times. The goal I think he scored at Burnley was a real cracker. Did that at times in training. We thought, yeah, he's going to be a real impact player. The problem at the time was that we were performing so well in a 4-4-2 or 4-3-3 at times that you couldn't get players out of the team. I'm not just saying that for myself, but we brought Adam Smith in, and if anything, it gave me a rocket up the backside to say, well, he's not coming in and taking my place. And it was so hard to get into that team because we were performing so well. And arguably, I think Adam Smith would have been probably, if I hadn't played, the best right back in the Championship at the time anyway. So it was such a unique and a hard team to displace anybody in that Championship winning season. And Tequila was no different. And I don't know if he expected that when he came into the club. I don't know if he knew he'd be second string or he thought he'd get a run of games, but it was never going to be like that. And for strikers, as you can imagine, if you're not playing week in, week out, and you only have a bit part to play, it can be hard mentally because you want to be on the pitch. That's why I look at players like now Dom Solanke bided his time incredibly, really, to come in and know he'd be playing second fiddle to Callum and Kingy for such a long time. And almost without saying it was the best thing that happened to him, but playing Championship football and being relegated gave him the opportunity to now come into the football team and be our number 9 and be our focal point and get the goals for us. And if he hadn't got injured of late, he probably would have been still chipping in with 13, 14, 15 goals. So for strikers, it's different, I think. Biding your time is the hardest thing. And maybe that wasn't on his side. He just thought after a year or two, if I'm not playing or I'm not getting enough game time, I might have to go elsewhere. But no, he never had a bad attitude. He always worked hard and he was a nice lad.
Was there a point, Franno, in that promotion season when you thought we're going to do it, we're going to make the Premier League? I mean, for me, it was Huddersfield away, first game of the season, but I'm a born optimist. So what about for you guys? Yeah.
I think Reading away, the 1-0 win away at Reading was certainly the one that the lads will speak about as being that turning point. I think Tommy probably came in after the change room, and that's when he believed. He said that's the performance we needed. He knew we could do the pretty side of it. He knew we could outplay teams any game, score goals. But we scored early against Reading, and there was just a different feel about it. We were under the cosh for a long time in that game, which again never normally happened to us in the Championship, especially the second season, the promotion winning season. And I think that's when we knew we were close. If we can see this game out, we've almost done the hard work. We've shown that side of our game where in the first season, the Championship, we lost to Watford heavily, might have been 5 or 6, Huddersfield as well the week before. And physically, we weren't up to it. We thought we could just play great football, score goals, outscore teams, and nothing would happen to us. We'd done that in League One and been fine. But those were almost the lessons we needed in the Championship. And then that night at Reading away to really cement ourselves in the league as the dominant force. So I would say as a group, as a whole, after that Reading win, that was when we believed we could make it.
That's good. I mean, I must have been a Bournemouth fan too long because I've had that much disappointment. It was only when the third goal went in against Bolton that I started thinking we might be able to do this, you know, when the third one went in against.
Yeah. Well, you can't get too carried away, of course, as players. We never thought until that night. I mean, I was sitting in the stands, I was suspended at Bolton, so I was a fan for that night, and it was worse watching, believe me, than playing because it was horrible. And
it was.
I'll tell you, we did know it was going to be in our destiny when I think was it Fulham Middlesbrough on the Saturday.
Yeah.
The results had gone our way, and we had a group chat on WhatsApp, and suddenly all the messages are flying through, and it was like, Monday night, lads, this is it. This is the night to change our lives. And it was you know, thinking about it now gives me goosebumps that all the lads had that belief, knew going into that one game, that one night, and we were never going to lose that game from the start. The lads were on it. It was like that was it, win that game, and we were up, and you know, the rest is history. And what a fantastic night that was.
Yeah, it was. What role did Kenwyne Jones play? Because he didn't play a lot, did he? But he wanted something. Did he put something into it, or do you think we'd have still been fine without him?
Well, he got us the point at Ipswich away, didn't he? So he played his part, and sometimes that's all you need. He was a great lad in the dressing room. Came in probably again like Tequila, knowing he's not going to be first choice striker, but sometimes loans work out like that. They can come and just have an instant impact at the time. Didn't necessarily suit our style of football, like I say, to start games in our team, but could come on and scare teams at a time when we needed sometimes that extra 5-10 minutes at the end just to pen teams back or be an outlet for us. Again, when you're under the cosh, you sometimes need an aerial ball. You need a focal point to play it up to and hold it up. And he certainly had that. And yeah, he played his part, no doubt about that, Kenwyne. Among with a lot of other players in the squad at the time, it's definitely not just about the starting 11. No. I mean, the team did pick itself in the Championship for weeks on end because we were performing so well. But you have to look at the squad and players that ended up playing in the Premier League more than they did in the Championship. Junior, Dan Gosling, Adam Smith, like I said. Players who were willing to bide their time and be patient and realise we were on something special and wanted to be a part of that. And, you know, you're only as good as your squad, certainly not your starting 11. We just had a great squad at the time, a great set of lads all the way from League One, Championship, who had the same goal as well, the exact same motivation. No no outside influences, no, if I do well here, I'm going to move there, or if, so and so are watching me. It was all promotion with Bournemouth into the Championship, promotion with Bournemouth again to the Premiership. We're Premier League footballers. Everyone was on the same page, and that's why we were successful.
You mentioned Reading, and I think the fans were the same. We really felt like that was a key moment. Like you said, we've been playing some great football, and that one we really grinded it out. And then we had the Sheffield Wednesday game, and the roller coaster of emotions was unbelievable. And for you as well, in that change room after the game, obviously you got sent off. Matt Ritchie scored a worldie, and you think we've done it. And then we gave away the penalty at the end, Smithy. What was the dressing room after the elation of Reading, to then go to that? And for you personally as well, getting sent off on the day, that must have been a really weird feeling.
Yeah, I felt I'd let the lads down, and you go through stages like that in your career, especially when you get sent off. You do feel like you've let the team down. So I felt bad enough, and then Smithy came in after, and I didn't realise until he came in and the lads had said he'd give a penalty away, and he was really upset. He was crying. And again, that was when we had such a togetherness about us. We just all put our arm around him and said, look, it's not your fault. We're in it together. You haven't let anybody down. If anything, I was one that let the team down by getting sent off. And then Smithy was so upset that he'd put everyone's almost careers on the line to be promoted to the Premier League at the best opportunity we had. And everyone felt so sorry for him that he had put so much emotion into that. And that was his feeling. And even from then, we were like, let's do it for Smithy. He felt so bad. Let's flip it round and turn it into a positive. And again, going into the Bolton game, everyone was so driven, so focused on winning that game for each other as well, for the staff, for the fans. And like I said, there was no way we were losing that football game.
I'm still not sure it was a sending off anyway, Franno, to be honest.
No, it was pretty soft.
Yeah.
They've all been pretty soft.
Yeah, well, the Arsenal one was even softer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you'd like to think even if now with VAR that wouldn't have got given. But I was never. I got sent off a fair few times, unfortunately, for Bournemouth. They were never malicious tackles. I was sometimes just too late or too enthusiastic with ones, or too booking. Sometimes you just, that split second, especially at the top level, you think you're going to win the ball and you don't. Again, even the Wolves one, when I got sent off and I come back after my knee, I remember, and I made a mistake really after the game. I went straight home. I was so disappointed. I was so gutted that I'd let the team down again, and thought that was me after my knee. I thought I'm never going to get back to any kind of level. So I was really disappointed, and the manager wasn't happy. Eddie said, you can't leave the lads. You should have been in the changing room afterwards. And I felt really bad on that one. That was a huge regret of mine, that not only had I let the team down, but I should have waited afterwards to apologise. So yeah, red cards are terrible really for any player, but certainly I felt them.
Talking of happier times, the open top bus. So did you drink as much as some of those players, or were you always in control?
No, I had my fair few. I think Jan was probably the top of that list. He had champagne for about 48 hours straight, even on the bus. We were definitely nursing hangovers that day. And we got on the bus right near the train station. It was such a surreal feeling, because we were driving through the roads and there was nobody about. And we were like, well, we get about 11, 12,000 into the Vitality. So maybe they're just dotted around and they're going to be somewhere. And nobody had told us that everyone had lined up on the beach. So whether that was a surprise for us. But we headed down from Boscombe down towards the pier. And then as we were turning around the little roundabout, you started seeing people on the beach. And it was just, for a couple of miles, just completely full. And that was a feeling I'll never forget. Had my daughter on the coach at the time, and my wife and my little boy were down on the beach as well. So it was trying to spot them as we were going down. But that was a phenomenal feeling. Again, something I'll never forget. And those moments are the ones you won't forget. Fantastic memories. Yes, playing in the Premier League again against the top players are what you want to be a footballer for. But you can never take those moments away with your teammates, your friends at the time, being on an open top bus and having everyone look up to you and see what we've done for the town and for yourselves and the fans. It was just a momentous occasion and one that we'll never forget in a heavy few days, definitely.
So the best part being in Bournemouth as well, because if you win a league title with Crew, you've got to drive down the high street, haven't you? Whereas here, you've got all those gold makers of sand.
Exactly, and we didn't know where everyone would be. We didn't know they'd be along the beach, so that was a great surprise for us.
It was. That summer, I mean, obviously it would have been really exciting summer for you all, but also for a lot of you that have been predominantly League One, League Two players going into the top flight. Was it time of self-doubt, do you think, or nervousness, or how was your mindset going into that season?
No, the first season for sure. We had no fear at all. Everybody backed themselves. Me and Matty were at the top of our game. I felt the fittest I've ever felt in my career. Every pre-season for about 4 or 5 in a row, I felt fitter coming back every single time. I knew I had to work harder. Again, I had Adam Smith backing me up, so I knew I had to be at the top of my game, even in pre-season, to have that shirt on the first day of the season. And I backed myself. I felt really good. I thought this is my chance to be up against some of the top wingers in the Premier League. And I loved every minute of it. Sometimes they got the better of me, sometimes they didn't. I knew that with me bombing on and underlapping and overlap, that would give them a problem as well. Like I said, I felt really fit. I felt like I could do it for 90 minutes week in, week out at the top level. And for the first couple of seasons, we did. The first season was fantastic. We had that fearlessness about us. I know a lot of teams underestimated us, even from the off, really. Aston Villa, we outplayed. I know we lost the game, but West Ham away, we were excellent. Looked like we could have scored on every attack. And we knew each other's game inside out. And at the top of the Championship and probably bottom half of the Premier League, there wasn't that much difference at the time, I don't think. So we backed ourselves against a lot of teams in the Premier League, and it was a great first season.
That was definitely one there when we were talking earlier about your assist. That cross for Callum's, I think it was his first goal against West Ham.
Yeah,
that was really good. I really enjoyed that one. When you went up to the Premier League, obviously it was match of the day, things like that. A lot of pundits kind of writing Bournemouth off, and a lot of them kind of saying they need to change their style to stay up. Does that give you an extra bit of motivation, or does it ever put doubt in your mind that, do we need to change our style a little bit to stay in this league? What is it for you? Because you must hear things like that, and just keep doing what you do better. Or do you ever feel maybe we do?
God, I hated hearing that saying. I really did. And I'd watch Match of the Day when we were on, because I hadn't, for years and years, I hadn't been able to watch Match of the Day when Bournemouth were on, and I'd stay up and watch it, or I'd watch Goals on Sunday on the Sunday morning. And as the season went on and we were losing games and we were a little bit close to the relegation zone, or the season after when we were at times, and people were saying they got to change their style. Just why were we going to change when for 4 years, 5 years we were so successful with? And it wasn't just, we did mix it up in games. We weren't just complete total football and we'd get caught at the back all the time. We had the ball in behind or in the channel. We always had the outlet. So, I mean, change our style to what? That's what I don't understand when people say it. Change your style to just sitting back against top Premier League teams when inevitably they're going to score, or you just go negative and defensive. And to be fair, in the last couple of seasons, we did end up changing our style. We had to at times because there was so much riding on it, and it ended up not suiting us. Yes, we were going to lose games at that level. That was always going to happen. But if we could do it in a way where we're still trying to play exciting, positive football, especially for you guys when the fans are in the stadium, then at least we can give you guys something to be happy about. We were still going to attack teams. And even moving forward with the football club, as long as we're doing that, as long as teams are doing that, and we're not becoming a team that are just sitting off teams, even in the Championship, and letting other teams have possession, it just can't be that. So I just think, and with Eddie as well, he was so stubborn and so driven as a manager with his style and his philosophy as a coach, that we were never going to change that. It was what brought us success, and it was what we were going to stick to. And ultimately, for 5 years, it did give us that success.
I think it's quite odd when you listen to pundits talking about Bielsa at Leeds at the moment. They're playing this sort of attacking, free-flowing football, very aggressive, very high press, and all of that, which is not too dissimilar to how Eddie had our team set up, and yet they lose 6-0 and they get all the praise still. It makes no sense to me.
Because it's Bielsa. I mean, and they're a massive football club, so. Yeah, everyone's just happy to see Leeds back in the Premier League. I did feel like for years, and even towards the end of last season, people were probably thinking, well, it's Bournemouth are the smallest team that's ever been in the Premier League. Maybe it's time they take a step down in that. And I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand hearing that kind of talk. And I just felt we were a breath of fresh air for so many years in the Premier League, something unique, something we'd never seen in the Premier League, a club of our size to be so consistent for so many years and be so good. And then, like you say, it's almost similar football, especially in our first season. And who knows if Leeds will blow up? What will they say next season? Bielsa can't keep doing that. But that's what Marcelo Bielsa does with his football teams. And it's so exciting to watch. And I felt like that's where we were at in the first couple of seasons for sure.
I mentioned Bielsa because I know Tom loves him. So, Tom, there you go.
No, it's a similar thing. That's the only reason that it frustrates me, because I watch Leeds at the moment and think they're really entertaining. But I think that's like what we were like. But Eddie was told that he was naive and needed to change his style, whereas Bielsa gets all these plaudits. So that's what frustrates me, because I could see a lot of similarities, and we were always told to change. So yeah, it does seem a little bit unfair. But like you say, Leeds are a big club, and I think everyone's just happy to see him back in the Premier League, and that's what's kind of boosting that. But yeah, I think there's very similarities, to be honest.
Ed should have sat on a bucket. That was always his downfall. If he'd sat on a bucket, then we'd have been all right.
Yeah, that would have been the difference. Yeah.
You had some great battles with players, wingers. I mean, you were alluding to it earlier on. I mean, I always thought with Wilfried Zaha, I always thought you held your own really well against Wilfried Zaha, but obviously he was a nightmare to mark. Who would you say your toughest opponent was? And also, is it really weird? Because I've always wondered, when you've grown up sort of like playing for Bradford and Sheffield United, and all of a sudden you stood on a pitch next to, say, Ibrahimovic. Do you actually are you looking at them thinking, oh my God, that's Ibrahimovic? Or is it just another body you've got to track? Sorry, two questions.
Mentality you have to have. That's okay. The mentality you have to have in the Premier League is it's just another body. The moment or minute you think, wow, this is Ibrahimovic or this is Aguero, Kevin De Bruyne, you've lost the game, because the moment you start thinking you're inferior to these players, chances are they're going to go past you, and you almost knew it was going to happen because you're already thinking negatively. And that mindset we had in the first couple of years, I felt like that. They're just another team. They're another body that I have to come up against. And it's interesting you say about Zaha, and I always say he was the best player. He brought out the best in me as a fullback. In 1v1 defensively, I'd love playing against him. I felt like I got the better of him majority of the time. And not because I knew what he was going to do, because I didn't, because he's one of those players that I'm not even sure at times he knows what he's going to do. He can go inside, he can go outside. He's strong. We always squared up to each other. There was always some kind of argument on the pitch. And I loved it. It brought out the best of me. I'd love playing against him every time, even when I think it was my first game back before Money, or Brooksy's, one of Brooksy's first games against Palace at home. And Zaha played. And Smithy had been playing in the team and he'd done really well. I think he went to the left side. Can't remember what happened to Charlie, maybe, or Diego. And it was my first game back, and that was one of the first times I was really nervous, because I was coming up against Zaha again, but I hadn't been playing, so I didn't have match fitness or momentum. But from the off, I got tight to him once, nicked the ball off him, and he started moaning at the ref, and it was like I was back. I knew I was there, and I had a great battle with him again, and I loved it. I loved it every single time I played against him. Then there were occasions when I didn't get the better of wide men. Leroy Sané, out and out pace, especially in my latter years, was hard to contend with. I think we played a 5 at the back against City one time away from home, and basically me and Smithy were just marking Sané together, and it was every time Zinchenko got it or De Bruyne, you're on your bike because you know he's running in behind for the first 10 minutes, and then the space would open up in front, and then you didn't know whether to get tight or stay narrow to your centre half. It was so hard to mark him. Eden Hazard as well, when I played right back and he'd play off the left. And then moving centrally, Aguero and Kane, they were definitely the top two strikers that I came up against. Their movement was something else, something I'd never experienced. How often they'd stay offside when players building up, and then the last minute when the players would get it and turn and they'd dart in and then go past you again, and you thought they're offside a minute ago, but they're onside, they're running in behind. Just fantastic footballers to come up against. But I have to say, Neil, like you said, Zaha certainly brought the best out in me. But yeah, you couldn't see them as on a pedestal or a better player than you, because you thought that from the off and you'd already lost.
It's a shame you said you haven't got Twitter, because I always remember after that game you mentioned, I had a nice little tweet with you in there, emptying your pockets, and you emptied Zaha out. I thought that was, you would like to see that one. You did. I always said that Zaha was. All Bournemouth fans say that. I remember that game that you're alluding to, and you come back in the side, and it almost felt like, yeah, that's because you always seem to have a really good tussle with Zaha. But you mentioned there about when you went inside. How was that for you? Kind of, I suppose, looking back on it, it seems like a natural progression because of your build and things like that, and maybe when you're getting a bit older to move inside. How did you find it, and did you enjoy it, or do you always say I much prefer playing right back?
It was a strange one, really, because for a couple of years, especially the first two in the Premier League, pace-wise, fitness-wise, and strength, I felt good against any wide man like Zaha. I felt like he was never going to outmuscle me. I was fairly big myself. I was strong, and I was quick enough at times over a race, maybe not off the mark, to catch him up and compete with him. And then especially the little injuries I picked up, I had a few hamstring injuries in a row, and just getting older, basically, you can't you can't beat time, can't beat father time in football, unfortunately. And then the knee injury, which meant I was never going to be the same again after that. So moving inside was a natural progression, but it happened early because I think either Tommy might have been injured in the first season. I played Liverpool away for a game, and I just felt at ease. I felt comfortable there. I knew I had a range of passes in my locker. I felt fit and fast anyway, so anything in behind I was comfortable with, and I just enjoyed stepping in on the ball. And the manager said to me after, "Did you ever know you could play centre half?" I said, "No, not until after tonight." And he said, "Look, it's an option moving forward. It means we haven't got to sign another centre back for a couple of years. So if ever anyone's injured centre half, you can move in." And we had Smithy who could play right back. So it was a good transition and a natural progression. And then even after my knee injury, it was never going to be a case of being able to play 30, 40 games at fullback. It was always going to have to be centre half and potentially filling in at fullback. And that was a shame for me. I would have loved to have played more games at fullback, but again, you don't see too many in top teams, Premier League football, or in attacking teams like we were a fullback at 33, 34 years of age. It's a hard position to play, especially in our team.
You talked, Franno, about the fearlessness that the team had going into the Premier League, and certainly for that first couple of seasons, we were afraid of no one. Did you see that change in the team, and why do you think that was? Was it due to players moving on and different players coming in, or what was it?
It was a bit of everything. I think eventually the team had to change because, again, players got older, players moved on. And like I spoke about Tequila Ranti, replacing players in that team, because it was so unique, it'd come up through League One and the Championship, and you could pretty much name the team every single week for those 3 or 4 years. It was always hard, and I know this now working in recruitment and even speaking to people who were there through that time. How are you going to go and find another Charlie Daniels or a Simon Francis or a Callum Wilson? They're not out there. They're just someone who's ready to come in and replace the players that are in there straight away. It's so hard to find. So then we'd look at younger players that Eddie knew he could coach, like a Lewis Cook, and work on the grass with him and get the best out of him for months to come, not necessarily someone who's going to come in and play straight away 40 games, because again, it was hard getting used to the patterns of play we'd have, the partnerships all over the pitch. And it was almost like the success we'd have with the team going up to the Premier League almost became our downfall, because it was just so hard to find that certain player and individuals to come into the team and replicate what we'd done all those years. And ultimately, after 4 or 5 years, the squad just looked so different. And I think Eddie had done fantastic to almost maximise every single bit of potential out of the players that then were coming through, the younger lads, to replace likes of myself as well. Smithy was a unique one because he'd been there on the journey as well. Dan Gosling could come in and fill the void of Andrew Sermon and Harry Arter. Other players, Junior was almost ready-made to come into the team. But even David Brooks, I mean, he came in and was excellent early on, but he had injuries and he was never going to be brilliant for 3 or 4 years. It just doesn't work like that. So it was such a unique process we had for the 3 or 4 years getting promoted, then the time in the Premier League, that it was hard to really bring players in that straight away could replace Callum Wilson or Josh King. Again, it's like with Dom Solanke, people were questioning him in the Premier League because he didn't score goals straight away. But how is it for him mentally to sit on the bench knowing he's not going to start behind Callum and Kingy, but to take his chance when it comes? And like I said, now we're seeing the best of him because he knows he's the main man. And we know how much ability he has and technical ability. And in front of goal now, he looks a real threat. So it's just, I guess, time really. It happens to all teams, to all players, all managers. And unfortunately, it was the way it turned out for us in the last season.
In the 4th season, we had a really deliberate change in style. I mean, you spoke about it earlier on. So we'd had 3 years of really trying to dominate possession against some great teams, fullbacks pushed up high. And then there was a really deliberate change, and you could see it in the possession stats in the 4th season, where we set up to be more counter-attacking and let sort of like Josh King and Brooks go on the break, and then the rest of the team kind of sit back deep. Was that obviously a very deliberate thing? How did Eddie explain to you as a group of players that there was going to be a significant change in the way we played?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a deep conversation we had. I think it was more of a natural thing. We'd lost players, so we weren't becoming that out-and-out possession team that we were. Teams were getting better in the Premier League, no doubt about that. Managers were coming in and playing better possession-based football at the top end of the league, and we knew we had to adapt, not necessarily change completely and just sit off teams and become negative and long ball. it was just about adapting to the environment we were in. First and foremost, we wanted to stay in the Premier League. That was the most important thing. But we'd brought players in who were fantastic on the counter-attack. I think when Matt Ritchie left the football club, we were all thinking, when Jordan Ibe came in, he's out-and-out pace and trickery. And look, he's had his problems, we know that. But on the training field, I have to say, he's one of the best I've seen in tight areas and 1v1. Unfortunately, he couldn't put that into games. And he's had the career and the problems he's had, which is a real shame for him. But we did become a counter-attacking team because we had the players, and ultimately you have to play to your strengths. The times we got promoted, we had great players on the ball. We could keep the ball for long periods of the game. And with Matty one side and Pewey the other, we weren't out-and-out pace players who were going to beat fullbacks time after time, although Pewey did it for fun with his chopping and his delivery in the box. But we did have to adapt. That's all it was, I think. Respecting the Premier League, respecting the top teams you're going to play. For so many years, we went out and just went hell for leather against the top teams because we were fearless. We knew we could match them, and we probably nick something out of the game and be entertaining. But we just adapted. I think that's why the manager was great, because he was willing to do that. In the first couple of years, we stuck to our style because we knew it was going to be successful. But ultimately, at times, you do have to change little things, little tweaks. We still had the same rotations, the patterns of play, and the same assets in the team at times, and Callum and Josh King scoring our goals. But we had to adapt. There's no doubt about that, unfortunately. And there was lots of reasons why we got relegated after lockdown. I think more so than any other team. I think not having you guys there was a huge factor. I think we saw that straight away in the performances at home, the negative impact that had, and it just everything took its toll on the football team at that time.
You mentioned Jordan Ibe, an interesting one. You've said exactly what a lot of people say about him, but I was just thinking, he actually did give you quite a decent game, didn't he? I think it was away at Birmingham City. I remember noting him down as one, and I wonder if that was part of the reason why Eddie signed him, because you had quite a tricky game against him, didn't you?
Well, he asked me about him. He said, "I was Jordan Ibe to play against," and I said, "A nightmare." At Derby as well, when he was there, he used to do this thing where, although I knew I was quick and I could back myself down the line, he'd front you up and square you up. And you knew he was going to go down the line, but you couldn't go too early because he'd go inside and he was quick. But then when he did it, even with the ball, he did it quicker than you. So it was almost undefendable. So I'd either need help from my midfielder or wide man inside of me, and then I could overcompensate down the line, so I knew he wouldn't do me there. But he was great in tight areas. Although I hated seeing Matty go, I was so gutted to see him leave to a massive football club, Newcastle, obviously. For the first few months, I have to say, I was excited about what Jordan Ibe was going to bring to the football team. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that. The manager gave him a big run of games as well. I think he played 8, 9 or 10 in a row. Yeah. And you were starting to see signs. He was still young. Yes, he wasn't going to be great for 90 minutes in a game, but he certainly had flashes of brilliance. But unfortunately, a lot of off-the-field problems played its part for him. And just moving forward, you have to wish him the best. I mean, whatever's gone on with him, he's really struggled with. So, yeah, it was a tough time for him.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if Eddie's scouting process was, if they played well against Franno, I'll sign him up. I remember going to Blackburn and Josh King playing off the left, and he was a nightmare for you as well on that day. So I wonder if Eddie thought that if they could get a Franno, they must be good. So take that as a compliment.
Well, yeah, not just me, but yes, you know, when players play against top teams, you talk about it on a Monday morning. You say, well, how good was he at the weekend? And then, you know, that you relay that not necessarily to the manager directly, but you're talking about that, and the manager will see that. He was like, well, if he has played well against us and we're one of the top teams, then imagine what he could do for us. And Josh King was a great example. I think we changed formation about 3 or 4 times in that first half just to try and combat him from a back 3 to a back 4. And he was brilliant against us. And yeah, absolutely right, Tom. That is definitely a recruitment process that you'd have to undertake.
So now we know why we've never signed Zahala.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. He wouldn't have got in our team. He wouldn't have made it any better.
If only. Yeah, if only. So at the start of the season when we got relegated, you were co-commentator for a pre-season friendly, and you stated that the system that you'd been asked to play would result in us letting in a lot more goals than previous campaigns. Do you think that change was one of the problems with our season last season, or I mean, I know the fans were a big issue for the 9 games towards the end of the season, but for a lot of us, it felt like we didn't have any consistency last season, and it was really hard for us to understand how he could be so good one week and then, you know, just not turn up against West Ham in a really important game the following week, you know?
Yeah, and it's hard to sit here and not think of reasons or excuses why it did happen. I mean, we had a lot of injuries to key players that season. Myself, I was out for a long time, and not that I would have made a huge difference in games, but just to be in the dressing room. I remember after lockdown, I wasn't even allowed in the dressing room. It was incredible because of the COVID rules. So I couldn't even be in and amongst it with the lads, and I felt like I was really missing out on that, just to try and motivate some of the lads and try and give them that extra edge. And then even before that, I know what you're saying, the consistency with trying to pick the best team was hard for Eddie, trying to get the best out of players. And ultimately, when you're at a football club for a long time and then you start looking down the bottom and the Ryan Fraser situation, I know for a fact in a few of the lads' heads, they were then thinking, well, if you do get relegated, what does that mean for me? Different for the older players like myself, I wasn't going to get a move off the back of it. But this is why it's different when you're in part of a squad that gets promoted from League One. You're all on the same page. You have the same motivations, same mentality, same mindset. And football is now that when you're at a Premier League club, if you're in a struggling Premier League team, you're trying to perform the best you can, because then if you get relegated, can you get a move to another Premier League team? That's just how football is. That's how footballers are, and you can't think bad of them for that. But that's how careers are. You know, if you're in a struggling, like Nathan Aki, he's the nicest lad in the world, probably the nicest player I've ever played with, the best lad. And again, ability-wise, up there with David Brooks, I knew he'd go on and have a great career, but there was no way he was thinking, if Bournemouth get relegated, I'm going to stay there. Manchester City would have shown an interest months before we were relegated. So it creeps into players' minds. It's completely normal. It's football. And once that is in players' heads, it can be a tough time for the football club. No more than what happened with Ryan Fraser. Of course, it was a sticky situation and not one to really talk about, but he felt like he was doing the right thing at the time and he was going to earn a move out of it. So he has done ultimately, but we could have done with him. There's no doubt about that. He would have made a difference in that team before getting relegated, and just accumulation of things really, guys. After lockdown, nothing suited us. No fans, all the restrictions in place. I felt for Eddie more than anyone. I think we could see how hard it was on him physically, and all that time he had in lockdown to think about what we were going to do, and then come back and watching that Palace game up in the stands, we were almost unrecognisable as a team, and I couldn't believe it. It was hard to watch, and I felt for everyone involved, the lads. There was no way they weren't putting in the work. I know it looked like that at times, but they were working hard on the training ground. I saw it firsthand, and the manager was trying to do everything he could. Nothing changed in that respect, but it just wasn't to be.
Yeah. I think the difference with Nathan Ake was, and you couldn't say something higher of anyone, his last contribution for the club was potentially one that would injure him in blocking a shot against Everton. I think he threw himself into the last-ditch tackle, and that to me was the mark of the man, wasn't it? So
never injured, hardly ever injured in his time, and then for that to happen at the end of the season was almost, like you said, a mark of the man and a sign of the times at the football club. Really, we were picking up injuries every single week at the time, and on a personal level, throughout the lockdown, I felt great. I was struggling with my knee. The last game I played against Burnley, probably had one of my worst games I've ever had as a player. You guys would have seen it. I was awful when I was being targeted by Burnley, and I hated that. And I always looked at players and defenders, and I always felt if I was ever that player who was being targeted maybe before games as isolating down the sides, get balls down the side of Francis, and I knew that was happening in that game, and I came off after the game and I went to see Eddie actually, and my knee wasn't right. It was still swelling up, but he'd had a couple of injuries, so it was almost I had to play, and I just said, I don't feel the same. I can't do this at this level. When I'm feeling like this, I don't feel confident, and like I said to you, Neil, if you're already thinking that going into a game, you've lost. You have a 50-50 battle, you're going to lose it because it's already in your head, and when that started creeping into my head, it was a bad place to be. Lockdown, I felt great. I got my knee back to normal from cycling mainly, doing a lot of off-feet stuff. And then I got back to training, it blew up again. I had to have another operation, injection. And by that time, the season had finished and I could no longer affect what had happened to the team. So it was a really tough time personally as well.
When you've got a manager who's so invested in a club as Eddie, so the club was Eddie in effect. When they leave, obviously you've got your WhatsApp groups and everything like that. What sort of shadow does that cast on a club? Is it almost like a period of grief kicks in, or how was it, particularly for you older guys?
Yeah, no one said a word on the WhatsApp group. I think that's how hard it hit a lot of the players, especially the older ones who'd been on the journey with him. Yeah, he rang me because obviously I hadn't been involved and I hadn't been able to be at the ground with the lads, and I'd had my operation. He rang me after the Everton game, I think a day after, and said, "Franno, I just want you to know that I don't know my future. I don't know what the club are thinking about my future, and I don't know your future." This was talking about me as well, with my contract situation being up as well. And he said, "All I want you to know is that you've given me everything through my time here." And it was a bit of an emotional one because we never had that conversation. I had to thank him for everything that he'd done. I said, "Look, I wouldn't be here without you. You made me the player that I am. The success that we had as a football team, I was so proud to be a part of, and then captain, and that was all down to him." And it was a tough conversation. I know he would have had it with a few of the lads, especially the lads that had been there longer term. And it was tough, a manager like that. It was always going to come to an end, of course it was. But to happen in the way it did, I would have loved. What I would have loved to have seen is to have kept the team up and then walk away. If he still felt it was the right time, then end on a high. But ultimately, there's no way getting relegated would tarnish anything that he's done at the football club. But maybe it was the right time, staying up or being relegated. He had to take a break from it. And speaking to him recently over the past few weeks, he almost feels re-energized already, the time he's had away from it. And I think that was always going to be the case. Look, he put in so much work. Honestly, guys, he would be in at 6 a.m. and then leave 6 p.m. You'd never see him arrive any later than any of the lads, and he wouldn't go home before everybody has left the building. That's how much work he put into it. If he wasn't on the training ground, he was in his office, he was in the presentation room, he was walking around, seeing everybody, seeing how everyone was. No one deserved the success he had more than him. He put in absolutely every ounce of effort that he could do, and no more so than his family and his kids would be grateful to see him at home for this time that he's been, because I know the hours that he put in the effort.
I think that's something for us fans to find really difficult, is that because of the situation, we couldn't kind of say goodbye, if you know what I mean. We weren't there on his last game. That was really difficult. And I remember the pictures from Everton, which was obviously the last game, and it was really difficult to see. You could see how disheartened he was from the relegation, but obviously difficult to talk about now. But did you feel like, obviously after Eddie had left, did you feel like when Jason was announced that was a transition that you saw happening? You could see managerial kind of qualities in Jason, because that's something that's obviously always alluded to, that role of being the number 2 and then going up to number 1 could be quite difficult, especially with a group of players that you've dealt with in a certain way for so many years. Did you see something that Jason had them qualities in him?
I didn't see the appointment coming, no, I have to be honest. Because Jason had worked with Eddie for so long, you saw him as a number 2, you saw him as JT, the positive guy on the training field. Took us defenders for years. He was defending himself, worked on our game a lot, and we all respected him for that. When I thought it might have been happening was how it went on a little while without being anyone named, and the short turnaround we had from the end of last season to the start of pre-season. So it was the right appointment at the right time. We have to say that, and no one could begrudge him for taking it. If he was offered it in that capacity, how could you turn that down? The squad that we had, the know-how he's got of the league, the championship, and the players. It was a perfect opportunity for him. Ultimately, a couple of months down the line, and results speak for themselves. That's all I can say on that, is that we had to become a threat again in the league. Dropping out of the playoffs would have been a huge disappointment for a squad with this ability. We can all see that. I've sat there on TV many a time and said this squad, this ability in this league is by far the best. Problem is, a lot of things have happened off the field, with obviously Eddie leaving and then JT coming in, and the results not going our way. So it was always going to, how do you follow what Eddie Howe's done at the football club? It's almost like what you saw at Manchester United when Fergie left, David Moyes comes in, and almost instantly it's not the same. The players would feel that, results would reflect that. So it's always going to be a tough time for the football club moving forward. Even over the next couple of years, getting the manager right is so important. But the expectations we hold with what Eddie did for the football club is so hard to match, that I just hope we can do it this season. That's the most important thing, promotion out of this season, which is so unique. I think it's a great opportunity for these guys, among other teams that will think the exact same. They'll be thinking Bournemouth are 6th in the league. They might make the playoffs. We have to become that threat again to be pushing the top 2. There's no doubt about that, and I think we've got the players to.
So I know you probably don't want to talk about who is going to come in next, but what sort of style of manager do you think it needs to be? Because we all know that the players have great technical ability, but it just seems that they don't have that same belief that they had even last season. Some of the mistakes that are getting made, you just think, I don't know, it's almost like a self-confidence thing at the moment.
Yeah, and it is that exactly, a self-confidence, self-belief. And even at this level, you can get relegated from the Premier League and think you're a Premier League player, but there's no league more unforgiving than the Championship. It's relentless. It's every single week. It's midweek. Mentally, you have to be on it. You have to know that you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, and you have to be the best player on the pitch Saturday, Tuesday, especially in our team, I believe, in a team that should be promoted this season. So the next guy that comes in has to be a great man manager, a huge motivator, know the team inside out, even though he hasn't been at the football club. Hopefully would have watched our games and watched what we're best at, how to get the best out of our players, and still stick to the style that's made us successful over the past few years, attacking football, positive football. So when you guys are back in the stadium, you know what to expect. We don't want it to be negative, sitting off teams, because that won't suit us. I don't think we don't have the players for that. We have the players to dominate football games in possession. Out of possession, we still have great defenders, 1v1. I'm talking about Steve Cook, who's been there all that time, still such a great defender. Lloyd Kelly, who can be anything he wants to be in the game. Athletically, he's fantastic. He's got all the attributes. Smithy, who can still bomb up and down at fullback. I could go through the whole team, of course. So whatever happens, the next guy coming in should be excited because he's got a great group of lads there who can get the best out of. But it's a short period of time. It's such a unique time to bring in a new manager to a football club, and almost the remit be, we've got to get promoted because it's such a short period. So he has to have a bit of everything. It's going to be tough, of course it is, but hopefully we appoint the right man and we can start moving up the table sooner rather than later.
Jonathan Woodgate, when he came in, he spoke about it being a quiet dressing room. And I was just wondering, in the summer, obviously, yourself, Andrew Sermon, Charlie Daniels, we had a chance to get Mark Pugh back because he was training with us and we didn't take that. And then latterly we let Dan Gosling go. So obviously we're not experts as fans, but I would look at that group of players and say they were people who would have been good voices in a dressing room. Do you think in hindsight maybe we should have kept two or three of you?
It's a tough one to comment on that. I did say to JT, I said, I understand the reasons for letting me go. I understand on a purely match fitness basis, I might not be able to play 30, 40 games even at championship level, but I feel like I would bring a lot to the dressing room. I'm not going to be banging on your door saying I must be playing week in, week out, but I want to be in that dressing room. I think Sirs would have said the same. Charlie as well, coming back from injury. Yes, we're coming towards the end of our career, but you still need those lads in the dressing room. Cookie and Smithy being there, obviously through the leagues, bring that experience now. But you just can't buy that. You cannot sign just experience to come into the dressing room. It has to have been there for a number of years. Players that know the football club inside out, know how to be on the training ground, the standards that are set. And football's going away in that, and social media, I spoke about it earlier, plays a huge part in this. Players don't want to talk anymore in the dressing room. Honestly, guys, that's gone out of the game. Even little things like nights out, it's it brings together lads more than ever, but it's gone away from the game. The first thing players do when they come in off the training ground, they sit on their phone. There's no conversation in dressing rooms. There's no communication anymore. So then you're just looking at players who have got out and out ability, trying to get the best out of them on a match day, because ultimately, away from the training ground, you're not going to be as tight-knit as we were 7-8 years ago in League One and the Championship. So football has changed a lot, certainly, and at this football club. And that's why I feel like I can bring a lot to the recruitment department now, because I've been in that dressing room. I know what will work in this football team, and hopefully we can get back to that. Yes, you need a balance of experience, young youth coming through, great footballers. And I still think the team has that now to get promoted, but ultimately to carry on going 2, 3, 4 years down the line, we're going to have to sign the right footballers. And that will be a process that will come in with the new manager as well. And hopefully I can be a part of that and bring success back to the football club.
Yeah, it leads me on nicely to the next question, Franno. I think most Bournemouth fans would say you could have comfortably done another season in the Championship with us. If it wasn't to be with us, why didn't you continue playing for someone else, for example? Why did you feel that now was the right time to hang up your boots, so to speak?
A number of reasons, Tom. I remember the first lockdown we had, and I was used to being at home and I was injured. And I sort of said to myself, and it was a negative way to think about things, but this is what it's going to be like when I'm retired. I didn't mind it, to be honest. I didn't mind being at home. I started exploring other things like the media side of the game and the recruitment side of it, and speaking to the guys in the department, Richard Hughes and Andy Howe, who's head of recruitment, and it was something I enjoyed as well. So I was starting to take those steps towards that. And then even when Jason told me the news, yeah, of course I was disappointed. I was gutted to be leaving the football club, but it was also a sense of, I've got nothing else to prove. I don't want to go anywhere anymore. I don't love the game like I used to. That I'm going to go to Southend, for example. Mark Molesley rang me up and said, "Do you fancy it?" And I said to him, "Look, Moles, I wish I could sit here and say, yeah, I'll think about it, but I don't want to." I had to be honest with him. Even Brian Stock at Weymouth, and I know it's a big drop down. He said, "Look, you can train whenever you want. You can coach the guys. You can just play on a Saturday, whatever you want to do. But you'd be a huge help in the dressing room." I just said no. Even my agent said, "Look, wait till October. You know, it might be deadline day." And Andrew Sermon did similar, and he wanted to carry on playing, Charlie Daniels as well, and they ended up getting moves. I just didn't want to do that. I wasn't in that frame of mind to sit around for 6 weeks. So whilst my agent didn't know, I was almost telling everyone else that I was retired for a number of weeks. And it felt like the right time. I'd done everything I wanted to do at the football club. I'd achieved everything I wanted to. I got closure from my knee injury, getting the win back at Chelsea. When Goss scored the VAR goal after that night, it was quite emotional for myself, because I proved a lot of people wrong again with coming back after an ACL, which not many people do at the same level, and I certainly wasn't at the same level. But I played another Premier League match, and for me, that was all I wanted to do after that knee injury, and I'd done that, and I knew I'd achieved everything I could at the football club.
So what about the Simon Francis Academy? Because that's what you're doing now, and I know that a lot of our younger supporters love it, especially Ethan, who's a regular contributor to Back of the Net. Do you want to just tell us a bit about it, and any idea when things will reopen?
Well, last year's been tough. Yeah, we've had to obviously close the academy because we can't just can't train like a lot of grassroots level football at the moment. We just had to shut it down. It was going great. I loved every minute of it. We were in a different school every day of the week. We had our Wednesday night sessions down at Ashdown, which were great. We were getting 100 kids plus some nights, and Ethan was a huge part of that. And it was open to kids of all abilities, all levels, boys and girls. And it was a great opportunity for me to try and give something back to the area, to the community, and be involved in football, because it's the game that I love. Harry Arter obviously had the academy before me, and when he said to me towards the end, I haven't got the time to do this anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. I was the first person to say to him, I'll take it off your hands. I'd love to do something like this. I know I'm going to live in the area for years to come. There was already some great people on board. The head coach, Jack Brooks, who's excellent, who we've had to furlough at this time because he was the only one fully employed at the academy. So it's been a real tough time, but we're excited to go back to it. Definitely, I'm sure kids are as well. Any kind of outdoor activity and training is something we're really looking forward to. And we're hoping, even given next week with Boris's announcement, we can start looking forward to some kind of date and some kind of time we can get kids back out there playing, because that's what they need, especially for their mental health.
Very true. Very true. And the Sky punditry, obviously that's been a new addition for you this season. A couple of questions. Do you enjoy it? Do you find, because you seem very natural at it? And is it hard when we score? Do you leap off the sofa like Ian Wright, or do you manage to? And staying impartial, that's the other thing. How easy is it to stay impartial?
Well, that's been the problem doing Bournemouth games, and I know I'll get asked to do them now because I'm just coming into the role in the media side of things, and they want someone who's got that knowledge of the football club and can be relevant, and I completely understand that. But I always say to them moving forward, I'm more than happy to do any Championship game, any League One game, League Two, anything like that. I know these divisions. I study football. I'm obviously working in recruitment, so I'm watching a lot of games as well. But I get it. They want me to do the Bournemouth games, which is great. And when we win and when we do well, it's great to talk about. The problem is when you lose a game and you have to be opinionated or say some things after a game, and like you say, try and be impartial, you then don't want to tarnish your role as a pundit because you're sitting on the fence and not saying what potentially you should do. So it's great doing the games now and doing Bournemouth games. And hey, hopefully towards the end of the season, we're either could be a playoff final or in the top two, and I'm commentating on the games then, and we're getting promoted. That would be the ultimate for me. But yeah, it's something I suppose I've wanted to do over the past couple of years. Really, there's not much better than sitting down and watching games and then talking about it and getting paid for it. So I definitely can't complain that I've been given that opportunity, and it's definitely a path that I've been enjoying going down.
Good stuff. Well, we're going to give Tom one last question. So Tom, whatever you wanted to ask Franno, now's your chance.
All right. Well, if you weren't a professional footballer and you weren't able to have these opportunities that you have now, what is a kind of profession that you would have maybe gone into if football was out of the question? Is there anything else you ever thought about dabbing your hand at when you were younger?
Well, I was definitely at that stage, Tom. When I was at college, I was studying sports science, trying to get a BTEC in sports science at the time. So it would have been something down the sport route, definitely. Whether that would have been a PE teacher or something like that. That was then what I had in my mind. I never until I went to Bradford, and even until I was working under Eddie, that's when the ambitions of being a Premier League footballer started to enter my head. But at the time, even just being at Bradford playing in that youth team, I took it step by step. So when I was at college, it was just get a BTEC in sports science, see where it goes from there. I literally had no aspirations to do much else, because when you it's hard for younger players when you get released at 16. All you've known for 7 years is football, and you can't help but think, I'm going to be a professional footballer. From the age of 9 to 16, you think that all the way along, and then you get released, and it's like, what do I do now? You have to then almost start from the start and go back to basics. And I think they're bringing in a lot of psychologists now for younger players who get released, because they're mentally they're all over the place, and it can be hard for them. And again, social media plays a big part in that. You only see positives on there. These young kids who go through the negatives of being released and finding tough times. It's more important than ever that we find the help for younger players who do get released at a young age to try and still make it in their way. And the PFA have been great. The FA have been great looking after players who finish early or have problems off the field. And yeah, I would have said I would have gone down a sport route, definitely. And that was definitely the stage I was at.
Before, Jeff, I've got to say one more thing I would have forgotten.
Go on, go for it.
No, I told my younger brother, I told him I was doing this, and he worked in consortium in Bournemouth, and they used to get all the Bournemouth players come in quite regularly. He used to always tell me, I was very envious. And he told me to say that Franno and your family and things like that were always the best people to work, pleasure. And said he loves you because of that. So he wanted to send his thanks for being a great customer. So I've had to say that.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. One of the good shops that Bournemouth actually had for a number of years, Consortium. And I think they were always one of the first shops that got these Adidas trainers, the Yeezys, for a while. And the lads had cottoned onto that at Bournemouth when they first started coming out, and they were always the first down there. But no, they had a good relationship there. They were good guys.
Grade coming in white suits and everything. He had some brilliant stories of Gradle coming in.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The most outrageous T-shirt I ever saw on a footballer was Lee Bradbury. I bumped him in Bournemouth once. He had a T-shirt that should not have been allowed outside a house. But
yeah, you could say that's some outrageous gear, Lee. Yeah, definitely.
Am I allowed one last question, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, what about management? Because you speak so articulately about the game. You could be the perfect blend between Eddie Howe and Neil Warnock.
Well, I've played under both, so you'd think so. Everyone asks me that, especially towards the end of my career, if I want to go down that road. And I think whatever you do, if you stay in the game of football, you have to be passionate about. Along with a few of the other lads, myself, Cookie, Charlie, Harry, Tommy, I think we did our B license a few years back, and the PFA were great. They came down to the training ground, and we did it once a month, I think, in the afternoons. And it was fairly easy, to be fair. Normally you end up going to St George's Park and you do 2 weeks, and it's quite hardcore. And I probably wouldn't have enjoyed that, but the B license I enjoyed because I was with the lads. But it was easy, really. You're in your comfort zone. You weren't coaching anyone you didn't know. And then I worked with Eddie for all those years. And in a funny way, he put me off coaching and management because of the hours he put in. Honestly, because I think to be that successful, and I think if you want to be a manager, you should be ambitious and driven, or even a coach, you've got to be willing to put those hours in. I put in a lot of hours as a footballer. I know we did get a lot of free time, but I wanted to step away from the grass for a while. That's not to say I won't do it in the future, but I did get a passion for the recruitment side of things, watching younger players coming through, scouting younger players. I had the opportunity to go to Italy with Richard Hughes and our head scout at the time, Des Taylor, to watch the England under-21s tournament, and I loved it. It was 2 games a day. I was taking notes. They weren't giving me any tips on who we were potentially watching, and I just went in completely eyes open to everything, and I loved every minute of it. And from then on, I thought I'm going to try that route, see how much I can enjoy that, which I'm doing now. It's been great. Not been ideal with lockdown. We can't get to a lot of games as scouts. We get declined quite a lot, and all the players I'm watching are behind closed doors, so it's hard to know if these players will be good when fans come back, especially younger players. So it's been interesting. It's been a tough year, definitely on that respect, but I've loved every minute of it. But coaching right now is not where I see myself but that's not to say in the future that I won't go down that road.
Fantastic. Well, look, Franno, it's been an absolute pleasure you coming on. Really appreciate it. And in fact, I was just thinking, Tom, maybe we should get Franno on to the watch along for the Southampton quarter final if he's not working for Sky that day.
Yeah, that'd be nice for that. I can't wait
Oh
for
yeah,
that
that'd
one.
be good. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see the goal celebration.
I think it's BT, so
it is BT. So you won't be there for that, will you? So yeah, we'll see the 6-shooter come out, won't we?
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. No, it sounds good, guys. I've loved it.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Well, that was fascinating conversation. I mean, he's such an articulate bloke, and you're right, Neil. He knows the game so well, doesn't he? But what an interesting conversation that was.
He's a top guy. I mean, I mean, he won't remember obviously, but I bumped into him with my son outside the West Ham game, and he stopped and had a chat to us. And you know, some players are really natural when they do that, and others just can't wait for you to sort of like do a smile and go on your way. And I always remembered how great he was that day. And you know, that's how he came across. Now he's just like a proper decent bloke, isn't he? Like again, it's like a chat down the pub.
And very honest and refreshing with that honesty, Tom, as well. A lot of the stuff he was saying there was brand new for fans like us and really interesting, I thought.
Yeah, definitely some really, really good insights there. And I think we saw it as a player, the model pro, consistent, and then we've seen it when he's been on Sky and things like that, an absolute natural when he talks, and just seems like a top all-round bloke, doesn't he? Who I didn't realise how much he seems to be so invested in football, and he's so, you know, everything's football, and you can see why he wants to stay in the game to some capacity. But yeah, breath of fresh air and some really interesting little things, and as they all say, amazing words about Eddie, as they all say how good a coach he is. I mean, it's just the same with everyone we talk to, isn't it? The first thing they all say is the amount of time that Eddie Howe puts into everything, and that just doesn't change with whoever we speak to, does it?
Is it right for us to feel even more nostalgic and wanting Eddie back, Neil, after that?
Well, I think we always will. I think wanting it and it happening, two different things. I'm sad to say, but he was a one-off as a manager, and I think when you speak to the older players, you just hear that so clearly. And I think it's just a shame that maybe some of the later crop didn't quite have that same experience with him. But no, I mean, I think Franno summed up perfectly what Eddie did for this club. Not that we really needed it, because we all know.
Yeah.
Tom, I think when he said that he spoke to him recently and he's quite re-energised and that now, my mind was screaming to just shout out, can he come back then? Can he come back then?
Mine too. Yeah.
But that's, you know, taking that aside, that's really nice to hear that Eddie's kind of, you know, maybe had that time away that he needed, and, you know, wherever he ends up, you know, we all as fans, that says everything about Eddie, because wherever he ends up, we'll be keeping an eye, won't we? And just want Eddie to do really well. But yeah, I think it's there was a few things in there that was being evident to all of us, that kind of, like Neil said, that new crop, maybe it's very difficult to have what he had with that original group, and the fact that a lot of them have now gone is making it difficult, and we're in a difficult period. But like Franno said, we have still got the players there, and we still got some good staff there, and we just got to go through what was always going to be difficult. As soon as Eddie left, whenever it was going to happen, it was always going to be tough on it. But really pleased that Franno's still around the place, definitely.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks guys for joining that. I thought it was a great conversation, and look forward to having you on for the next one.
Cheers, Jeff.
Look forward to it.
So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give us a like, make sure you subscribe, look out for all the stuff that we're doing. Sam and the team, we're putting out as much content as we possibly can, and good quality content. So check it all out, and see you on the next show. Up the cherries.